Ghosh.
Thank you, Deputy President. Well, I rise to take note of the answers to the questions asked by Senator Canavan and Senator Smith in relation to productivity and inflation. By way of context on productivity, I think it's fair to accept that we haven't had significant productivity reform in the 2 decades to this government. That's a conclusion that's reaffirmed by the comments of the Productivity Commission. What the Productivity Commission also told the Cost of Living Committee before the Senate in June 2024 is that improving productivity growth in Australia requires applying a productivity lens across the entire policy landscape. Boosting productivity is difficult, and boosting productivity takes time, and it takes consistent investment. It requires us to improve skills in our economy. It requires us to improve and provide incentives for capital deepening across the economy, and it requires competition reform in Australia. To that first point on education and skills, we need to increase the size of the skilled workforce in Australia. That's both in terms of productivity gains that come from that, but that's also in terms of some of the capacity constraints that are driving some of these inflationary numbers. So one of the things the Reserve Bank has told Senate committees and House committees in the last 6 months is that while demand remains higher than they expected, it's slightly higher. And public demand's not the main game in that. But what they've also said is there are significant capacity constraints in the Australian economy, and it's that mismatch between supply and demand that drives up inflation. There are a number of measures that the government's implementing in order to improve productivity through upskilling the Australian workforce, but the best example and the most recent one is the Fee-Free TAFE program, which has been in place since January 2023 and to 30 June 2024 has had 508,000 enrolments. That's 508,000 new skills put into the Australian economy. And to break that down a little bit more specifically, 131,000 of those placements were in care, 48,900 were in the digital and technological part of the economy, 35,000 were in construction-related skills, and 35,500 were in early childhood education and care. 6 out of 10 of those enrolments went to women, and 1/3 went to regional and remote Australians. That's a policy that improves skills in our economy, and that's a policy that the Coalition opposes. They oppose it even though they see it's working. They call it wasteful spending and then have the temerity to come in here and complain about productivity when they oppose one of the main measures that would improve productivity in a fair way in our society. The second thing I want to talk about is competition reform. This government's approach to a revitalised national competition framework and policy has the potential, according again to the Productivity Commission, to return an additional $45 billion to our GDP and reduce prices across the economy by 1.5%. That's a potential and it's an estimate, I accept that. But there are 2 things I want to tell you about today. One is merger reform, and that is making mergers in our commercial sector quicker, simpler and easier. And that's by, first, removing unnecessary barriers to low-risk mergers, mergers that don't have a significant impact on competition in the markets. And the second is by—
Senator Scarr, is that the point of order?
It is, Mr Deputy President. I'm struggling to find out how merger reform is relevant to the answers to questions taken on notice by Coalition senators.
Well, competition reform is attesting to productivity, and I think the questions were of an economic nature, as were the answers. Senate, it's Christmas. Please go on, Senator Ghosh. I'm interested.
Oh, well, thank you. But can I also I appreciate the ruling, Deputy President, but can I refer to Senator Canavan's question, which said, Minister, how many businesses have to fail before the inept government will put forward a credible plan to bring down inflation and boost productivity? So I'm talking about productivity and the plan to do it.
Thank you for endorsing my ruling.
Thank you. Well, it was part of the answers too, Senator O'Sullivan. Can we also talk about non-compete clauses and their cost in the economy, and a proper review of how non-compete clauses operate in employment contracts would significantly add to the Australian economy. It has done in the United States in the implementation of those policies. Can I briefly talk about technology investment in that capacity as well? Now, the Tech Council of Australia last week released a report that suggested there's a significant opportunity to improve productivity and economic growth in our economy by investing in technology. We accept that much of that investment must come from a private sector perspective, but public sector has a role to play here too. And that's where the government's National Reconstruction Fund, a $15 billion fund to help businesses improve their technological capacity, comes into it. And that will give us the ability to continue to invest in technologies that improve productivity, drive economic growth and bring down inflation. And this is the broader point. Those opposite oppose these policies. They oppose investments in the economy, and then they come in here and talk about how productivity is languishing. These investments take time. The government's got its priorities right, and it's got a plan that's good for our economy.
Set the clocks for